Sana, I want to start by giving some context. I first met Honorable Raila Odinga in the 90s when I was chief executive of Finance Magazine with Honorable Gachoka Tabaki. Itobi Manyara was running the Nairobi Law Monthly, as Dr. Willie Mutunga will remember. And Pius Nyamora was running Society Magazine. And sometime in the mid-90s, Kenneth Matiba bought The People and put Didan Bogua there and David Makali. In those days, when we were interacting with Raila Odinga, he was really a lead in voice in the second liberation and the no reform, no election cry and calls of that era. Now, the reason I'm raising this issue of where these things started and why I think I need to raise my voice, because some of the things Dr. Miguna has been saying over the years have not had a corroboratory voice, and they are very important. I did not participate in the last general election by choice because other than the BBI marriage that was crafted by Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, there was nothing that was being offered in that election that could be able to liberate the people of Kenya. And yet I could not support William Ruto, so I decided to stay quiet. But when the election results were announced and Mandamano began in Kenya, there was a call that maybe they can redeem themselves, Azimio la Umoja. So I flew from Diani to Nairobi, and I met a group on the first day of Mandamano that Raila Odinga had convened in Riverside Drive. And when I got there, I found several people. I found James Orengo, I found Amolo Otiende, Senator Ladama, Ruth Odinga, Wajakoya, Professor Makau Mutua, and I will remember if I've forgotten who else was present. And the moderator of that session was Professor Makau Mutua, kind of asking, we have begun this Mandamano and why? So several speakers spoke about why the Mandamano was an option, why we are going back to the streets, and at that time, the danger of people losing their lives. And why I have come out at this time is because of what Raila said in my presence. He stood up and said that he had wanted William Ruto to govern and give him a chance to see what kind of president he would be. But when he saw that he has bought MPs, he has bought political parties, he is cutting the democratic gains of the 90s, this man is following the architecture of Kaguta Yoweri Museveni and of the president of Rwanda, and that it will become a problem to contain him in the future. And that is why he has decided as Raila to come out in Mandamano, and he will risk his life and doesn't care if he lives or dies, but will not allow Ruto to go for anywhere anymore with taking away the gains of the democratic evolution of the 2010 constitution. And I took him at his word. Now, obviously, if you fast forward a bit, we then heard of certain talks going on behind the scenes. The Nigerian former President Obasanjo in Mombasa, in Ali Hassan Joho's house, and I don't know where. And eventually the whole issue of the African Union and all those things came up. And that was a way of removing the issues that were important, that were to be captured in NATCO, which means that the killing of democracy means there is no opposition to hold the president to account. Why? You buy MPs, you buy political parties, you use money and power and influence. And in fact, Azimio la Umoja had the majority of MPs. But this man bulldozed his way unconstitutionally, bought parliament, and forced a majority government. That is when Ruto became a thug. The moment he took over the National Assembly by force, and then I decided at that point, we are dealing here with a monster. And since that time, he has taken the opposition for a ride, and a ride again. He called them to NATCO. There was no intention whatsoever to implement anything of the NATCO, including the IBC. But thank God for these children of this nation of Jay-Z because of their struggle, because of the deaths of the people we have today honored by remembering their names, this dictator has begun to implement just one part of the IBC reforms. And I know Dr. Miguna will agree with me that this is even itself dangerous, because who is going to appoint that panel? Who will they be? Will they be now people they sit down, Odinga and Ruto, and they decide who to appoint? And then from there, they appoint another puppet commission or electoral commission, and this country goes from worse to worse. The reason I'm speaking out, and I will continue to do so from this day forward, is because you are completely right. We are at war for our nation. There is nobody that can tell me that Kenyatta and Odinga were not part of the problem. And I say that because I was present when we were doing an audit of the election laws. And it was agreed that Maandamano is being done not for anyone to gain, but for the emancipation of the Kenyan people. But for Baba, all it took for him was to be offered the African Union job, and he betrayed all the people of Kenya because he never believed anybody else could fill the streets. In fact, I remember when people used to fight Dr. Miguna from Nyanza, they used to say Miguna cannot fill the stadium. Miguna has no army, he has no military. They never said anything about his ideas or what he was saying was true or untrue. But what has now happened is an awakening across regions, tribe, across all gender, and people of Kenya have said no and have come out. And they are forcing certain things to happen. The second thing I want to raise is the issue of the military. You know, the law that directs Parliament to consider the deployment of military is contained in Section 241. Now, 241 has two sections. Section 3B allows the Minister for Defense, without a motion of Parliament, just notifying to bring out the military in cases of disaster and emergencies. But Section 3C allows Parliament to have a motion to bring the deployment of the military and then specify what they are supposed to do. Now, what happened with the military being brought down on the streets of Nairobi was illegal because they never had a motion tabled in Parliament. Nothing was declared what the military presence and deployment meant. And without going too long into the legalese about it, Dr. William Mutunga can clarify the two elements that are necessary for a legal deployment were not done because no motion was tabled in Parliament that was passed, even as the High Court described. So today as we speak, in technical legal terms, Kenya is a military state. The military state because the KDF are deployed, whether they are hidden in the barracks or not. What is this that Ruto is anticipating? What is this that Duale is anticipating that they want to leave the military deployed? Is this because, as Raila Odinga told me, that this is a student of Yoweri Museveni who governs through the military? So I cannot put anything past this president because a man who can see 12-year-old children being shot 10 bullets, 70, you are talking about 41 people dead, and not even a government minister attending any funeral. Why do you think this man, if things go south, they cannot bring in the military? As we speak today, I saw Kenyans in Muranga take over a police station because they did not believe that the murderer who was alleged to have committed a crime would be taken for justice. So they raided the police station and they killed him, just as we speak. So my question is, and to the people that are doing the demonstrations, including all of us, we have to keep asking the question, why is there a legal military deployment in Kenya? And in fact, who has to benefit from it? And what chaos is there in Kenya that requires that? Or is somebody going to manufacture a problem like they did when they went to Githurai the other day? And they created a problem. Are they going to sponsor some kind of terrible issue and call it a problem? The other third and final issue I want to raise is the issue on corruption. I am looking at what happened the other day to the former governor of Migori, who was charged with crimes of up to 1.9 billion And somewhere, the executive and others are negotiating with him to go scot-free, catch some property of 200 million. Who knows what will happen to the other charges? You remember the MP for Cilicia, John Waluke, was jailed for stealing nearly 1 billion with National Cereal Produce Board. He was jailed and convicted for 67 years. He was serving a jail term, and the alternative was he had to pay back at least 1 billion that was lost by the government, and that is the only way in which he would otherwise be released. Today, as we speak, John Waluke ran for elections, convicted, he ran for elections. Nobody ever talks about him anymore. He's a friend of William Ruto. He's a central part of what's going on in Western Kenya and Western Kenyan politics. How can there be any nation on earth where a convicted and jailed member of parliament, stealing from the public, has been let loose to live and let live? We go to the deputy president, Gachoka, 200 and something million. Justice Minor of the High Court, before elections, had found Gachoka a case to answer. Over 200 million. We can go back to the Dubai plane hired by William Ruto, to Runturi at the Ministry of Agriculture, to the opulence of Mukomen and to Oscar Sudi. And you can look at all these things and ask yourself, all this money is the motivation for which these people are in power. Finally, I want to say this. If we had not defeated the BBI, the only reason the BBI was defeated is because of Chapter 4 on the Bill of Rights. That people have a right to be consulted on how their constitution can be altered and by who. It must be people driven. This time round, the Jay-Z and all of us who are here to discuss these issues are seeing a people-driven revolution for a better government, because there is no valid contract between the governed and the government. And we have a right, inherent right, to break that contract. So mine today is to add my voice that there is no talks, there is no negotiating, and I can tell you Raila Odinga lies to my face, and I'm telling the country as Tony Gachoka that he lied to me. And he lied to me why Ruto should not govern. And yet he's the same man now calling for other talks. And he's the same man who knows NADCO was never implemented. And he's calling for another NADCO, simply because he's been told by the president, this is conditional upon our deals going on, whether it's the African Union and everything else, but all other Kenyans be damned. I think that is my opening comment.